Hello, this is Dr. Brian Peterson. Thanks for joining us on All Bodies Outside. Today I have Toby Story, a wonderful friend of mine who lives down in Australia, and he is a sea kayaking adventurer and leads all kinds of expeditions out there. And since 2005, he's been working for a company called Southern Sea Ventures, and he purchased it in the lovely year of 2020. And it's a tourism outfit that's leading sea kayaking adventures from the tropics to the polar regions. And he has led trips in Norway, Greenland, Spitsbergen, Fiji, South Georgia, Antarctica, Tasmania, West Papua, and the Philippines. And right now, in the United States, we are in our wintertime, but in Australia, it's summertime. And so Toby is in the thick of his sea kayaking business right now. And so, Toby, thanks for coming on to the show. And you've been to a lot of great places, done a lot of stuff. And first off, I wanted to hear how you got into outdoor recreation and what ultimately kind of led you to leading sea kayaking expeditions.
Oh, hey, Brian. Thanks for having me on board. It's really exciting to catch up with you, and yeah, just looking forward to chatting about, all of this stuff. I guess for me, probably you don't really realize you're getting into it until you're in it, I guess. But, I grew up in the far southwest of Western Australia. Now, it's a very remote corner of the world. We were about 10 kilometres or sort of 7 miles from a small town of about 100 people. And that was our urban centre, and the property we were on was a big bush block, 360 acres of private bushland. It was basically a hippie commune, and we were surrounded by national parks, and just spent all of our childhood kind of roaming and exploring. And my dad was particularly into exploration and had done a lot of rock climbing as a young man, and bushwalking, and my mum's very interested in botany, and so we're always out picnicking and just exploring as kids, and that kind of became our that was our life, a big part of our life, just being outside and being together as a family outside. And that really just stuck with me, through the years. And when we moved to the city, and if we go to remote places, people would often look to me to sort of work out what we were going to do, because I felt very comfortable out there. And probably in my sort of early 20s, I'd done a whole lot of traveling, personal stuff, exploring, surfing, climbing, hiking. And I was really looking for a profession, looking for something, I guess, to fill my time. I tried a few other things, tried teaching, and I'd done a lot of work in the building industry and hospitality, and they were all great, good things to sort of get some money in the bank so I could go traveling or go adventuring or do things that I love to do. But eventually it wasn't that fulfilling. And I had spent a bunch of time in Tasmania. So I'd sort of done a trip. I'd done a trip to Indonesia. I'd done a trip to Europe. I'd done a trip to spend some time in India. I'd been to the US, which was actually my first international trip, just visiting my brother who was studying there. And then I went to visit a friend in Tasmania, thinking I'll go and drop in and see him on my way to Japan. I was really into snowboarding at the time, so I thought I'll do this big journey, in Australia, and check out some parts of Australia. And I got to Tasmania, and I just found a group of people who I really gelled with, and they were into hiking, and a group of them were into sea kayaking. And so I sort of started doing a bit of paddling with them, and just really got sucked in. I'd done a lot of hiking, and I was really keen on surfing, and sea kayaking just seemed to combine those things, my love of the ocean and my love of kind of exploration and multi-day experiences. And so I bought a sea kayak, and I did a whole lot of different adventures in Tasmania with groups, and then eventually kind of did a big 3-week journey on my own down the east coast of Tasmania, just exploring the coast and being out there. And then my dad actually found a course. It was a guiding course here in Tasmania, and I was going on this big international adventure, but I just sort of found myself at home here in Tasmania. And then I saw this course and I thought, this looks fantastic. And it was a year-long course focused on adventure guiding and nature-based tourism. And I just jumped right into it, and I just loved it. And really that set me up for the next 20 years, or I guess it's 17, 18 years now. I've been in and out of tourism guiding, done a few other things in between. I sort of got into guiding for about 5 years, working here in Tasmania and then in Fiji. So I was doing that, running multi-day expeditions for around about 5 years. And then I sort of started thinking about maybe I'll try something a bit different. So I studied photography for a little while. But, you know, I would still get offered opportunities to travel overseas and do work. And it was too exciting for me. And I just have always loved it personally, and really enjoyed exploring new places, but also introducing people to the activity of sea kayaking and sharing adventures with groups, and, you know, empowering people to do things that they don't do in their personal lives or don't feel comfortable doing. So really giving people a big adventure on the ocean. I've always just found that really exciting. So I sort of, you know, would always go away and do a few things, and came around to I was about to jump into my second year in photography, and I was offered a job as a guide trainer in Tasmania, running the program that I'd come through as a student while someone was away. And I thought, oh, this is too good of an opportunity. So I jumped back in and I was back in. And then I thought, oh, maybe I'll go to university, because I'd left school quite young, just looking for adventure. I think I left in year 10, so I was 16 when I left school. And I thought, oh, I'll jump back in and do university as a mature age student. And that took 3 years, but still I was being offered opportunities, and I got the opportunity to travel to Antarctica and work on a ship called the Polar Pioneer. And I was like, wow, this is too good of an opportunity. I can't turn that up. So you know, I started doing that in the summers while I was at uni. And this is, most of that work was for Southern Sea Ventures. So my old boss, Al Baker, you know, he would just sort of ring me up and say, oh, we've got this thing, you want to jump in? All right, you know. So off I go. It was a really great way to sort of spend my summers.
Yeah,
while I was working here in Tas. Yeah.
Kudos to your dad for getting you that course. It was a sea kayaking course.
It was actually more focused around. It was focused around nature-based tourism. We did a big range of activities. So the first sort of 3-4 months of the course were all about nature-based interpretation. So we were learning a lot about. It was very focused on Tasmania. So we were learning about different methods of sort of delivering information, and but also just learning a lot of information about Tasmania, about history, Indigenous history, colonial history, biology, botany, all the flora and fauna, different stories of the different areas, the geology. We had a lot of fantastic experts, local experts, who come in and talk about birds, or had a connection to the Tasmanian Aboriginal community and teach us a lot about traditional life in Tasmania. Had experts on colonial history who are really passionate about certain elements of that. So really got this fantastic exposure to Tasmania's flora, fauna, geology, history, and real grounding in Tasmania as a place. But we also did a lot of activities. So we were running multi-day hiking trips. We were doing whitewater kayaking and rafting. And we had a small component that was sea kayaking as well.
Okay.
Yeah, and rock climbing as well. We did rock climbing, abseiling too. So it was sort of everything.
Yeah.
And it was full on. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I know we've gone rock climbing together, and you did a great job leading me up some walls in North Carolina one time. Is that where you got your rock climbing started?
No, that was definitely from my dad, and then my brother, my older brother, who's isn't climbing much anymore because he's got 2 kids, but he's been a rock climber for about 25 years.
Wow.
And so it was always a way that we would stay in touch, or a thing that we could always do together. When I'd go see him, we'd catch up and go climbing. So I sort of kept. I love climbing. I have been in and out of it as well for around 20 years, but not as passionate as him, or not as committed as him, maybe. But so it was really him, and then I had some other journeys I did myself, climbing here, and did a lot of climbing here in Tassie. So in those early years in Tasmania when I came here, which was in 2001, I came here 2001. I was adventuring all the time, and part of that was hiking, part of it was sea kayaking, but part of it was also rock climbing. So I was doing a lot of climbing then with some people who were pioneering, climbing routes all over Tassie, and I was like, this is great. I'm just going to get involved with this. So I did a few journeys out to some of the outer islands doing some climbing trips.
Yeah. So is Tassie, and I'm going to call it Tassie because you were, and I love that.
Tassie's good. Yeah, Tassie's
good.
First,
I need to gain some relativity here. How far is a flight from Sydney to Tassie?
It's around about 2.5 hours.
Okay. Yeah. And Sydney's still kind of north in Australia, though, right? Like it's not the closest airport to Tassie, is it?
No, Melbourne is close, and that's only 45 minutes. You spend more time in the check-in than you do in the air. So, it's
real quick, 45 minutes. So is Tassie, what's the culture like there? Is it kind of like a Boulder, Colorado culture where everyone's just really interested in outdoors? You got, everyone's going running and rock climbing and stuff like that. What's the culture like?
It's a really mixed culture. I mean, you've got a lot. I mean, so there's a lot of primary industry here. So forestry, fishing, farming, and that makes up a big proportion of the population. People who are engaged in those industries, and then you've got a sort of you've got a lot of people who've come here for the natural environment, because it's a stunning, beautiful place with rainforests and wild rivers and huge open coastline and a lot of national parks and protected areas. About a third of the state is in reserves or national parks.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's a lot of space. Traditionally, there's been a lot of conflict actually between the kind of primary industry side of Tasmania and the green side of Tasmania. The big conservation movement here, and it was actually the world's first place to have a Greens party, so a political party dedicated to conservation of the environment, and that was really sprung out of a few big campaigns in the 1970s to protect particular areas. So there was a big movement in Tasmania to generate hydropower, but that meant blocking up a lot of rivers and some really wild and quite special places. So there was a lot of opposition to that from a segment of society, and that sort of created, there's always been this tension here about, you sort of on the green side or you're on the other side. And
right.
But so there has been that. It's been ongoing, and it still goes on today, with people living in the forest protesting the cutting down of trees, for example, or still there's a big advocacy group trying to reclaim some of these lands that were dammed, and then there are others who are sort of trying to push ahead with it for economic reasons. And so there's always been that tension here, and it's really fascinating. But generally speaking, culturally, people are very outdoor focused, regardless of the way that they do that. So like whether you're out there working in the forest, logging or milling, or out on the ocean fishing, people have a strong connection to the outdoors, or whether you're out there running and riding. And so we've definitely got both cultures, and both cultures are very strong.
Yeah, that sounds actually kind of wonderful to have both cultures come together, opposed to it kind of just being, a homogenous type of culture. I always kind of prefer some mix up and some change up and some variations of people and whatnot, opposed to just, like I said, a homogenous culture. Going back to, well, first off, how's the surfing down there? Because I think you've talked about surfing down in Tassie. Is the surfing good down there?
The surfing is fantastic.
Yeah.
But it takes a lot of time to find the waves. So very convoluted coastline. We've got and very varied. The west coast of Tasmania has huge waves. 20-meter swells come through from time to time, and wild westerly winds just blowing onto the coast for months on end and driving rain, and it's a big wild coast out there. And the east coast has got all these convoluted bays and beautiful coasts, varying from beautiful white sand beaches to big tall sea cliffs. And the swell sort of wraps all the way around the coast, from usually coming from the south, and there's a big variety of places to go surfing, and it's often a bit of an adventure. A lot of places you still have to walk to, or you always spend the day looking for waves. It might take you a day to drive somewhere to get to the right wave in the right conditions, but it's fantastic. And there's some really big and exciting waves down here, like Shipsterns Bluff, which is a very famous and treacherous wave on the southeast corner of Tassie. Yeah.
Nice. Well, I know you like to do some surfing. You've talked about that to me before. Hey, anyways, I want to transfer back over into your sea kayaking. And first off, I ultimately want to hear some stories of you out leading some expeditions. But I first want to know, what types of legal certifications or trainings do you have to guide people in these kind of very wild places? I mean, you're guiding down in Greenland, Antarctica, off the coast of Tassie. What types of legal things you need to take care of in order to do that?
Yeah, it's sort of it is a little bit varied depending on really the company that you're working with, and everything needs to be backed up with a good amount of experience. Is usually where people start. But so the different countries have different certification processes. The US will be using the American Canoe Association certificates, or there's an International Sea Kayak Guides Association sort of certification process. New Zealand has their own system. The UK and Europe have slightly different systems, but as does Australia. But and then for polar regions, there's a body called the Polar Guides Association that can also certify you for various different activities down there. So different companies will require different things, but generally speaking, for an expedition guide working in sea kayaking, you'd need some kind of wilderness first aid qualification, because you're typically in remote areas and maybe having to manage medical emergencies, and then some kind of sea kayaking qualification, which is sort of relevant to the expected conditions that you might be sort of working in, and then experience in a range of areas.
How do the conditions? I mean, you have done sea kayaking up in the Arctic. You've done it down in the Antarctic. How do the conditions vary between those two locations? And the wildlife is also very different too. Once we're getting within the water and out of the water. But first off, like in terms of water conditions, how do those vary between these two polar areas?
Oh, good question. I mean, it does depend a little bit on where you are. I guess. So the Arctic is kind of like an ocean surrounded by land, and the Antarctic is a sort of a big block of land surrounded by ocean. But we're always you're always kind of seeking out. So getting to Antarctica, like you have to cross the Drake Passage, and it's exciting, and the waves are huge. It's monstrous seas. Again, 10-meter swells, that sort of thing. But once you get to most of the activities like sea kayaking and cruising type things that happen in Antarctica would be by boat, and the same in the Arctic. A lot of those that I've done as well, anyway, are by boat because of the access. So first you're on a boat, and then the boat will normally go to different areas that are quite sheltered. So you'd be looking for places where there's not a lot of swell, because that and seas, or places that you can hide from the wind. For me, the Antarctic is generally a bit more adventurous. We have higher winds and rougher sea conditions most of the time down there. The Arctic, somewhere like Greenland, East Greenland, where we might spend time in the northern summer, it's often absolutely stunning. It's like can be flat, calm, and gorgeous.
Wow.
And then occasionally you'll have big katabatic winds, so where you have a low pressure system or storm on the coast, and that effectively sort of draws air off the top of the Greenland ice cap, and then you can have winds that will stream through the fjords, through the fjord system and out to the sea, and that they can come quite quickly and become quite rough, and they're dangerous. They're cold. In Antarctica, you have the same kind of thing, but we have very much the same process where like a big storm can pass by, and that not only brings localized winds, but will suck winds off the ice cap. But they can be a bit more ferocious, and they can be a bit more localized as well.
So when you're bringing clients out there, do you have to? What degree of experience do they need to have to enter into some of these challenging areas where the conditions could be very challenging and maybe something that would be pretty hard to do on your own if you don't know what you're doing?
Most people have some paddling experience if they're going to join the paddling sort of part of the voyage in the Antarctic and the Arctic, but not everybody. Really, it's you just need to be physically active and enjoy a bit of physical activity and adventure. And for most of us, we can pretty quickly teach people the skills that they need to get out on the water and have a really good, safe time. We always try to encourage people to prepare for the journey. So, often you're booking months or a year in advance. And so you've got time to go to a local outfitter and try doing some sea kayaking.
Gotcha.
And understand how the kayak works and just get a bit of basic fitness. But people who are not paddlers, who might be physically active doing running or swimming or even walking or any of those activities, tend to fit right in. And often we'll have, say, a partnership, a couple, and one of them might be a regular paddler and the other not. And then we pair people up in double kayaks. So that you can have a balance of experience levels in the kayak.
Gotcha.
And the journeys, in the Arctic and the Antarctic, we're looking more at exploration of the location by kayak as opposed to big, long kayaking journeys. Although we do some quite adventurous and fun, long journeys from time to time. But a lot of the time it's, there's this, you get there, you get in the kayak, and there's just things to see right there in front of you. There's ice everywhere. There's penguins. There's all kinds of beautiful wildlife right there. So you might not really need to go a long distance. Or whales pop up near the kayaks. So
that's amazing. So what kind of whales have you seen?
Humpbacks, minke whales. I seen a blue whale once when we were crossing the a blue whale with a calf when we were crossing across from Svalbard or Spitsbergen in the north across to the east coast of Greenland. We saw blue whales in the sea ice, orcas.
Seen any narwhals?
I have never seen a narwhal. No.
I want to see one of those someday. A male one, right? Because it's the males that have the what would you call it? The horn? The horn.
Yeah. It's actually effectively a tooth, but
okay.
And
did you and I have this? Did we talk about this before?
No, I don't know. I'm not sure.
I feel like I had this conversation with someone, and they're like, "It's a tooth," and I was like, "What?" And I had to look it up, and I was like, "No way, it's a tooth."
Yeah. I've also seen belugas, which are a beautiful white whale, a bit like a dolphin.
Yeah.
So
where do you see more whales? Do you see them up north or down south?
I've seen a lot more in Antarctica than I have in the Arctic. So one of the you were asking about sort of differences between the areas. I find that the abundance of life in Antarctica is just, it's so in your face, it's so prolific. It's
Wow.
There'll be like the penguin rookeries. Say on South Georgia, you might have hundreds of thousands of pairs of penguins just everywhere, just calling. And then in the later season, so February, March, the whales. February, March, the sea ice is melting. And as the sea ice melts, that releases nutrients, which means you have a blooming of krill, which is a small sort of shrimp, I guess, for want of a better word. And that brings the whales in to feed. And so in that February, March period, the whale life is really prolific, so mostly humpbacks. So we'll see, it's sort of all there in your face, it's really... But in the Arctic, particularly somewhere like East Greenland, you really, you're on the lookout for wildlife. It's more of a challenge. You've got the binoculars out, spotting and scanning and seeing what you can find. It's just a much sparser landscape, and so there's less wildlife to see. But it's the joy of the sort of the hunt, I guess, in a sense.
Yeah, exploring and trying to find stuff.
Speaking. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So up north, you've definitely seen your share of polar bears. And what's the most fun interaction you've had with a polar bear?
Oh, well, fun is a good way.
Yeah, I know, right? You don't want to get,
yeah, they're like, we've had. I mean, the first time I ever saw a polar bear was pretty special, but it was from the ship. We were looking for bears, and it's one of the things that's one of the the great animals to see in the world is a polar bear. They're beautiful, they're gorgeous animals, but they are incredibly dangerous. They're known for hunting people as well. They're predatory, and they do hunt and take people from time to time. So something we're always very, very vigilant about is scanning the coastline before we go ashore anywhere, so that you don't get surprised by a bear, not just for our safety, but for theirs, because that's the worst possible thing that could happen for a guide and someone who loves the wild places that we visit would be to have to shoot a polar bear, which is why we do carry rifles to because of the risk. But yeah, it's incredibly rare that a bear is shot. So the first time I spotted one, we were just traveling around on the ship looking for sea ice, because that's where they love to spend their time. That's where they'll be hunting seals. And we actually just sort of pulled up to the edge of the ice, and it was around about midday. And so the guys were making lunch, and we were sort of all out on the deck just enjoying the sun. It was quite a lovely day, and watching across the sea ice. And then it's like, oh, there's a polar bear in the distance. He sort of came bounding across, quite a young bear, so he's obviously quite curious. It was a male. And he just came right up next to the ice, right near the ship, and was just sniffing. And we're like, oh, it's the cooks. They'd brought him in. So, but it was a wonderful opportunity just to see him there on the ice, just really close to the ship.
Yeah, and you're safe on the boat, and you're getting this great vantage. That had to be really great, knowing that you're safe from the bear. The bear can smell the lunch being cooked or whatever is being cooked, and because a couple times I've seen bobcats from my vehicle out in California driving along in the mountains, and actually the two that I'm referencing right now I saw just crossing the road, and man, it was fun to be able to watch it from the inside of my car, because it's like I'm completely safe here. I mean, a polar bear is another beast compared to a bobcat, but it had to be amazing to have that safety and be able to just kind of watch it for a bit.
That's the fun experience, and I have had other experiences where we've been a little bit closer, and probably one of the first times I got close to a polar bear, I was on guard duty, so I was watching I could only see one side of the valley, so I was looking down the valley, scouting that coast, and I was up high, spotting. But there was a cliff to my left, and we had someone else spotting that side. But the bear kind of came from above, and it had dropped off the top of the cliff and was coming down a small gully, which was only about 100 meters away from where I was situated. It was not looking for anything. It was under a bird cliff. He was probably just looking for, fallen birds or anything like that. But I got the radio call from my boss. Oh, there's a bear, and he's coming your way. So you might want to come down. So, and you sort of creep back down to the foreshore and jump in the Zodiacs, the little motorized boats, and run off back. We can go and watch them safely from the water rather than being right there on land with them. And the next, I think probably only, and I think I told you this story before, Brian, but maybe 2 years ago, I was up in East Greenland, and there was a whale carcass. So it had brought in a bunch of bears from around the area. They were all feeding, and we were out paddling with a group. There was good number of us, probably about 10 of us. And we could see a bear up high up on the cliffs. He was just sort of resting, and thought, we'll go over, have a bit of a closer look. So we paddled over towards him, and he started moving down, and I thought, great, he's going to come a little bit closer. We'll get a great view. So we're in the kayaks, and kayaks can travel probably around about sort of 5 miles an hour. And a bear swimming can probably travel at around about 5 miles an hour. So, you should be able to outrun them, and they're not. Anyway, we feel relatively safe in the kayaks, but still, and then normally they just sort of have a look at you from the land. They don't do anything much, but we saw him sort of coming across, and I thought, we'll just wait a little bit, and we'll wait here. And he disappeared behind some boulders, and everyone was just sitting there waiting, and then popped out from behind the boulders, and he was actually quite close. All of a sudden, he was a couple of 100 meters from us. I thought, all right, everyone, put your cameras away, get ready. This is what we're going to do if he comes much closer. And often they'll just walk the shore, but he obviously wanted to cross back across the fjord to the whale, and came down to the water's edge. And I thought, he'll just stop at the water's edge. He'll come to the water's edge, he'll stop and have a look. And anyway, sort of got to the water's edge and then just plunged straight in and started coming straight for the group. And we're like, all right, okay, let's paddle. So off we paddle, and it's all fine, But he was tailing us. He did start following us, and we were like, okay, all right, we don't really feel comfortable. So let's go back to the ship. So we radio the ship. The captain was asleep, and the guy on the bridge who was managing the ship was Russian, and he really couldn't speak. His English wasn't great. So there was this one particular fellow who he wasn't sure what was going on, and someone else was asleep, and so I don't know why they were all asleep, but we were out having a good time, as the kayakers do. So anyway, it took quite a while for us to get someone on the radio to launch a Zodiac, because once you've got a motorized boat in the water, you've got really, really good protection. And then we also need that to get back on the ship. So anyway, we scooted around out there. It was a pretty exciting 10 minutes while we waited for someone to get on the water and make sure we were sort of protected from this bear. But
how many people were on your expedition when that happened?
Oh, well, there was about so the ship that I work with, or most commonly work with, is a 50-passenger vessel. So there's 50 passengers total, but around 10 of us or 12 of us were out kayaking at the time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's pretty close. I've never seen a polar bear in my life, and I don't want to get that close to one.
No, it was probably close enough. I mean, it was all fine, but it was a little bit anxiety inducing, and I'll definitely continue to tell that story probably for the rest of my life. So
yeah, especially being responsible for everyone too.
Yeah.
You have to put together a plan real quick. Gosh, so one of the things that you've told me before is, you've been kayaking in all these wonderful places, but you have a favorite location that you love to kayak. And this kind of ties it back to a little bit of our earlier conversation, but you have a favorite place you love to kayak. And I want to know, what that place is and why it's so special for sea kayaking.
Oh, favourites are always hard, but Tasmania is my home, so it's kind of always. It's I guess for me, it's the place where I really found my love of sea kayaking. I live here with my partner and my son, and I have spent, it's been now 15, nearly 20 years of kind of exploring the coast around here by kayak, as well as traveling. But this is always the place I come back to, and it's just such a diverse coastline. We have, for a paddler, we've got fantastic weather conditions, which means that they're really varied. We get lots of wind and we get swell and we get chop. So it's technically always exciting. You always have to think a little bit about where you're going to go, and because the sea kayaks are so impacted by wind, as well as swell. We've got lots of interesting landings, so you might have to land through surf, which for me, it's kind of fun. It's one of the enjoyable parts of not only of personal paddling, but also guiding, is bringing people through adventurous situations safely. And then we've got this incredible diversity in the coastline, from beautiful pristine beaches to towering cliffs, enormous sea caves and archways and tunnels made out of rock that you can paddle through when the conditions are good or right for those areas. So technically kind of working out, where we're going to go in any given conditions, and then getting out there and, exploring those areas is just one of the really great joys of guiding. And then also we've got a great diversity of wildlife out on the coast. So whales and seals and dolphins and huge variety of seabirds. And then because we've got a lot of national park and a lot of protected areas all throughout the Tasmanian coastline, there's always beautiful sort of coastal environments to explore, whether it's the forest or small swampy areas, or just all the different wildlife that we also have on land, like wombats and wallabies and echidnas and potoroos and lots of little fluffy things. They're really hopping things and running things. It's it's really exciting.
Well, it sounds like there's quite a variety of just landscapes to explore while you're sea kayaking in Tassie, and also just the wildlife is there's a lot of variability there too, which I think that adds to a lot of fun, just being able to see so much different stuff out there. So say that a young adult comes up to you and it's like, man, Toby, this is so cool. What you do is Southern Sea Ventures. I want to do something like that, but I've never been sea kayaking. But I'd love to do this. My heart is there. My passion is there. I know I want to do it long term. How do I get started on this?
Go kayaking. I mean, that's sounds really simple, but find some people that like to go paddling, and try and go out kayaking with people and just learning how sea kayaks work, what's safe. Definitely join a group. Like, it depends what's available to you. If you can get on a course that will teach you sea kayaking skills and give you the skills to get started, that's fantastic. You really should be paddling with another person, at least one other, because it can be dangerous on your own if things go wrong. It's difficult to rescue yourself without really quite high level skills that take a little while to develop, like rolling and self rescues. And even in because the ocean, once it becomes incredibly rough, it doesn't stop being rough, so you can get yourself into trouble. So it's always good to travel with others. So if you can find other people to get out with and explore with, that's fantastic. And then, of course, once you've got a little bit of background and skills and knowledge, find an outfitter and just call them and tell them you're interested. And they'll if they see your passion, they're going to help you grow as a professional and learn the skills around guiding. And being in kayaks. I've got a young guy who lives just down the road, and he's really interested in being a guide. He's only 16 at the moment, but he comes up and he just helps us out with preparing equipment for the trips, washing up equipment after the trips, and he's come along on one of the trips just to see how we do everything. And he's going to try and go off and do a course, which is sort of focused around outdoor leadership. And he's hoping that he can, come back in a year or so as a guide. And so there is definitely a bit of a process. You can't just jump straight in. You have to learn the practical skills around your personal skills around kayaking, skills and safety, understanding weather and navigation, and then there's the guiding side of things. How to manage groups. Once you've sort of mastered your own personal skills, how to manage groups in the variety of sort of environments and conditions that you might experience in certain areas. And then it's really learning new areas is again another skill. So you might learn to paddle, say, in the Western United States, a lot of fantastic areas for kayaking and a lot of great outfitters. And then you might transfer that skill to working, say, we have an operation in Fiji, and we get people from Canada and the US that want to come over and work over there. So then you just transfer those skills to a new area. And for me, that's, I started here in Tassie, and I did a few seasons here, and then I was working in Fiji, and then the sort of basic guiding skills and personal skills around kayaking and weather interpretation and safety management are all very transferable. And then you'll move to new areas. Usually you would be mentored by someone who's already been to those areas and will be able to show you sort of specifics about those areas. But once you've got those baseline skills and you understand the kayaking and you understand the guiding and how to manage people safely, then it's not that hard to start moving from location to location and building a repertoire of different experiences, working in cold environments or working in warm environments. The skills become quite transferable. So yeah, it's quite exciting as a career path.
It sounds super exciting. It sounds super gratifying too. And I love that it's kind of a combination of those hard skill sets in terms of, knowing how to kayak and reading the conditions out there, but also the combination with the soft skills with management of clients and putting together these adventures and the social part of it. And that sounds so much fun. I mean, it sounds like it's an extremely gratifying type of profession. I'm really proud that you now own Southern Sea Ventures. And so that was kind of one last question I wanted to ask you today was, how's it going with being an entrepreneur and the owner of Southern Sea Ventures? I mean, I think it's just so cool that you are the owner of Southern Sea Ventures.
Yeah, look, I love it. I mean, for me, it's sort of where I need to be. I guess it's just been it's been a long process to get here, but it is sort of for me almost the top of my career, I guess. Coming from as being a guide and then being a guide trainer and working first one area and then another and then more areas and then helping set up trips, helping establish new itineraries and new operations, and then eventually kind of taking over the company and having the opportunity to really set up trips in a way that suits my personality and suits our clientele. It's just fantastic. I'm really enjoying it. It's not without its challenges, that is for sure. Starting taking the company over in March 2020 was probably a pretty good example of challenging.
Yeah.
We sort of immediately went into a situation where we really were nothing. We could do nothing because we were an international kayaking company. We take people from various parts of the world, mostly from North America, Europe, and Australia, but also from parts of Asia as well. And we take, those people join trips all over the world. So they need to be able to travel internationally mostly. At the time that I took over the company, we didn't have a Tasmanian operation. We did have some of those maybe 10 years ago, but I really set up an operation down here. So we've got now 3 separate trips that we're running. Camping expedition on the Freycinet Peninsula. And we've got 2 lodge-based trips, which are basically you stay at some really nice accommodation, lots of local Tasmanian food, often sourced from the local area. So we're trying to sort of focus on that sort of sustainability element, and heading out, exploring the area, going to the best location based on the weather, and then coming back to a sort of warmer shower and a bed in the evenings.
Yeah, it doesn't sound too bad.
Yeah, so that's been really exciting, and just growing from being a guide, which is where I have been for a long time, to now doing a lot of employing a lot of people, not employing a relatively large number of people, a few people, and then helping to, and then looking to start new enterprises as well. So I'm going to the sub-Antarctic islands off New Zealand just after Christmas. We're working with another ship operator to set up a kayak program for them, which we'll manage. And then we've got another one in Svalbard or Spitsbergen that we're on another ship, which is actually this, anyway, round circular sort of history thing. We had a kayaking operation on a ship called the Polar Pioneer, this 50-passenger vessel, for a lot of years, around about 15, 20 years. That ship was owned by a Russian gentleman who acquired it when the Soviet Union broke up, and it was formerly a research vessel for the Soviet Union. So we like to say it was an ex-Russian spy ship owned by the Russian mafia that was then was chartered for Antarctica. It's probably kind of true, but he sold it to some Norwegians who have refurbished it and brought it back to life and given it, really looked after the ship. And I'm partnering with them now as well to deliver a kayaking program with them, and that's super exciting, to have that, because my boss, the original owner of Southern Sea Ventures, Al Baker, he was the first person to set up and deliver sea kayaking trips in Antarctica. So for us, that's sort of part of the legacy of the company. So going back into that in the next couple of years, or starting next year actually, is really exciting. So it's just been a great journey, I guess.
Yeah, it all sounds exciting. All sounds exciting. I mean, like, you get to take people sea kayaking. I'm sure they're overcome with a lot of awe when they're out there. They're doing something that's a little bit challenging. So you also get this sense of accomplishment. And on top of it, you're a business owner, and I mean, it seems like you just got a lot of levels of gratification going on. So it's kudos to you. It seems really cool what you're doing. So anyways, I wanted to wrap up today and just say thank you, Toby, for joining me. I know that we're on very different time zones, with you being down in Tassie and me being in Kansas, but it was great catching up with you. Appreciate you so much. For those of you listening out there, be sure to take the time to check out Southern Sea Ventures. That's the company that we've been talking about. And Toby, one last time, I wanted to say thank you to you for joining me today.
Oh, thank you, Brian. It's been an absolute pleasure. And yeah.
Right on, man.